If you've ever pulled a muscle sleeping or found yourself yelling at kids to get off your lawn, that might be a sign, you know? So today we're going to talk about why getting old, well, it kind of sucks. You know, they say life is like a journey, and part of that journey is getting older, right? But what happens when that journey starts to feel less like an adventure and more like a maintenance program? You know, I don't know about you guys, but I never thought about getting old when I was younger. To be honest, that was the furthest thing from my mind. You know, it always seemed like something far off, something that happened, to other people. But now that I'm here, over 60, and feeling it, trust me, I can tell you firsthand, getting old sucks. So, first of all, it's not just about the gray hair or the appearance of wrinkles, right? Those are some of the least of my worries. But it's just the way my body doesn't work like it used to, the way people treat me differently, right? And the way life itself feel like it has changed. I don't know if you can understand what I mean. Life feel like it has changed overnight. People are saying sir to me more frequently these days. Everybody is saying sir, good morning sir, how are you doing sir? Which makes me wonder if people are just being respectful or am just looking like a senior citizen. No, I have nothing against, becoming a senior citizen, right? But as, you know what I mean. But frankly, I feel a bit reluctant. I'm just going to be honest now, to ask for my senior discount at some stores, even though my wife keeps telling me that I should ask. These days, I'm now waking up with aches I didn't have the day before. I'm forgetting names more often, and then sometimes I catch myself, trying to reheat my food in the fridge instead of the microwave. Honestly, sometimes I feel like the world is moving so fast, I can't keep up. And it's frustrating. It's exhausting. And some days, it's just downright depressing, guys. I kid you not. Listen to me though. I'm not saying all of this to complain, right? Okay, maybe just a little. Because I am not, I know I am not alone in feeling this way, right? If you're a man over 60, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's talk about it. Let's get into the meat of the matter, right? First of all, I used to be a strong, robust guy. Look at me now. I'm just a shadow of myself, I could deadlift a few good pounds, I could run without thinking about my knees buckling, and I would wake up feeling ready to take on the day, ready to do stuff, around the house. Now, oh my goodness, just getting out of bed sometimes feel like an accomplishment. My back aches, my joints crack, and if I sit up in one position for too long, I can have to brace myself before I can stand up. And it's not just the pain, it's the impending, the kind of mental, the impending loss of independence. Because it's going to come someday. That's what gets to me. I can't imagine the days when I'll have to ask for help, ask someone to help you, maybe to put on your socks or to help you pull up your pants, But the fact of the matter is that there are many things I used to do so easily that I simply can't do the way I used to. You know, take something like yard work. It takes twice as long now, you know. Lifting or shoveling snow, you know, that used to be like a breeze. Now, I'm thinking about getting a snowblower just to avoid the shoulder and back pains that now comes with shoveling the driveway. Carrying a few bags of groceries in the house, forget it. Even something as simple as opening a jar of jam can turn into a battle I don't always win. You know, and let's talk about the energy part. Where the heck did it go? Where did all my energy went? I remember the days when I used to work all day, come home, and still have enough energy to go out and tackle some projects around the house. You know, now I take a nap and I'm still tired. It's frustrating because in my mind, I'm still the guy I was at 30, I was 30 years ago. But my body totally disagree with me. Here's the hard and sensitive part, pun intended, that no one likes to talk about, guys. But let's be real. Aging hits hard in the bedroom too. No, don't laugh, because this is no laughing matter, all right? I remember when I had the energy and drive for sex all the time. Because, in my mind, I was like a stallion. Well, like I said, in my mind. No, it's not so simple. Most of the times, the desire is there, but sometimes my body just doesn't cooperate at all. Other times, the energy isn't there at all. Talk about erectile dysfunction. Yeah, that's a thing. And even when everything works fine, it's just different. It's slower, less intense. Yeah, I still enjoy intimacy, but I can't ignore the changes. It's definitely, it definitely messes with my confidence sometimes. And I know I am not the only one. You see, no man wants to admit that he's struggling in this department, but it's a reality for most of us. I know it, whether you tend to admit it or not, guys. And let's not forget the prostate part. If you're a man over 60, chances are you've had your fair share of waking up, multiple times a night to pee, feeling like you have to go all the time. It's a nuisance, total nuisance, man. I can't get a good night's sleep because of this whole peeing issue. And the older I get, the more I worry about prostate cancer, because it seems like every other guy I know is dealing with it. It's a sad reality, but, I guess it's something we have to make sure we're on top of, by getting ourselves tested. I try to do the PSA test, at least once a year when I have my physical down, Let's talk about the mental and emotional side of aging, though. It's not just my body that's changed. My mind isn't as sharp as it used to be either. I forget things more often, I open the fridge or the kitchen cupboard and I would totally forget what I want inside sometimes. Names tend to slip away from me, and sometimes I honestly feel like my brain is moving in slow motion. I don't think I have dementia, guys. I really don't think so, because, I'm thinking about the fact that I'm still able to kind of plan this video, set up the gear, shoot these videos and edit and upload them, So I don't think I have dementia or any, anything impending. But it's still hard to diminish the emotional side of aging, though. I never thought I'd feel invisible, if you know what I mean. But sometimes I do. My co-workers are now asking me when I plan to retire. Seriously? And I know that they are not pushing me out, but they're rather kind of asking from a place of care, where perhaps they believe that I should now be taking it, kind of take it easy. But nevertheless, it messes with your whole, what I'm talking about. And back to the emotional challenges of getting old. When I was younger, people noticed me. They listened when I spoke. They respected my opinion. Now, I feel like I get brushed aside, like I don't matter as much anymore. And talk about the loneliness part of the whole issue of aging, That's real too. Friends have moved away. Some have passed on, and it's just harder to make new connections at this stage of life, I miss the days when my phone rang more often, when I had plans that didn't involve a doctor's appointment, And let's touch on relationships a little bit more. Aging affects relationships in ways I never expected. For example, marriage. Marriage for one. It isn't the same as it used to be, My wife and I, we love each other, but we are different people now than decades ago when we got married. We had to kind of relearn to be together, without the distractions of work, while getting, our kids independent and ready for the real world, if you know what I mean. Some days we're perfect, we're perfectly in sync, Other days, we just basically get on each other's nerves, And then there's the loss, I've had to say goodbye to people I never imagined living without, I can think, I'm so thankful my parents are still alive, but my grandma, who I grew up with and loved dearly, she has passed on. And many other people, siblings, old friends here and there, they're gone. And the absence of missing some of those people who have passed on, it's heavy. The older I get, the more funerals I attend, and each one is a reminder that time is not on my side. I used to think that by this age, money wouldn't be something I'd have to stress over. But here I am, still checking my bank account and worrying about whether my savings will last. And I get the feeling I'm not the only one in this boat. And what with all the tariffs and the inflation and just everything being more expensive, I can tell you, man, living on a fixed income is not easy. It's not easy. But nevertheless, for all the ways getting old sucks, I've learned a few things about making the most of it anyway. I can't deny that. I would not try to brush, the benefits aside. Staying active is key, right? I may not be running a marathon, but I make sure I move every day, Even just walk, taking a walk around the block kind of help with the joints and, from stiffening up and, you know what I'm talking about. I've also learned to adjust my mindset. Instead of focusing on what I can't do anymore, I try to focus on what I can, do. All right? I may not be as strong as I used to be, but I think I'm wiser. I've been through things younger guys haven't, and that kind of experience counts for something in my book. you know. So, you know, some of the other things I do, I find hobbies. You know, I would try to stay connected with friends who are, who are still in my life. And even just having a routine kind of help keep me from feeling as if I'm fading away. You know, some days are better than others, but I remind myself that, I'm still here and I still have things to offer, right? There's no sugarcoating it, guys. Getting old sucks. My body isn't what it used to be. My mind isn't as sharp, and life feels different in many ways. I never expected. But as much as I complain, I also know that aging isn't all that bad. It's not all that bad, I've lived a full life of experiences, and that's something to be proud of, The trick, I think, though, is to kind of focus on what is still good. I can still laugh, still love, still learn. I may not be the man I was in my 30s, right? But I'm still me, and as long as I'm still breathing, I'm going to do my best to make these years, my next few years count. Because even though getting old sucks, the alternative, well, that sucks even more. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Until the next video, you take care of yourself, and let me know how aging has affected you. If you're in your 60s, or you're approaching your 60s, or much older than I am. I'm just over 60 now. Drop a few lines in the comment section below and give me a little feedback and let me know how aging has changed your life and how it has affected you and how you kind of deal with it on a daily basis. All right? So until the next video, you take care of yourself. Bye-bye.